Hi all, we're going to look at Game 5 of the World Championship match, which I'm glad to say was another very exciting game, ending in one side winning. Kramnik was playing white, he played d4, Anand stuck with his guns and played d5 with the idea of going into the Slav variation. So the Slav variation characterised by this c6. Now Kramnik played knight f3, and after knight f6 we see a repeat of one of the previous games where black is voluntarily putting in the bishop in the pawn chain. It seems to be a bad queenside bishop, but black unravels later after waiting for white to play bishop d3 to now gain a tempo on that bishop with d takes c4. So the bishop is forced to move again, and this allows black to gain another tempo with b5, at the same time vacating the b7 square, so this bishop can be deployed there. After bishop d3, black played a6, so reinforcing the queenside a bit in preparation for c5. After e4, c5, and we saw a repeat of this sharp clash now after e5, black playing c takes d4, and now knight takes b5, a temporary knight sacrifice because white's going to regain the knight by taking on f6. So after g takes f6, instead of knight takes or queen takes, black is accepting some structural damage here to his pawns, but he has that pressure on the g file later, which in conjunction with his bishop coming to b7 will be quite dangerous for white. Kramnik, he has no fear. He wants to test black again in this system, and again just castles, and after queen b6 again playing queen e2. So which side is going to innovate from the previous game? We're about to see. After bishop b7, bishop takes b5 is played, and now it's Anand that innovates first. He plays, instead of bishop d6, which he had played in the previous game of this opening in this match, he played actually the immediate rook g8. It doesn't prevent white playing bishop f4. So bishop d6 in the earlier game stops white's bishop f4, which actually was played anyway as a temporary piece sacrifice. So Anand's obviously done a lot of intense preparation in this line and found out he can play either of these moves. So this system is set, it seems, to become more popular in the future if there are various options for black available. And simply rook g8 does seem, a logical move, just coordinating the rook and the bishop against white's king. So does it allow, though, white to defend with simply bishop f4 to g3? Wasn't this the point of bishop d6? Well, we're about to find out. Black plays bishop d6, and white doesn't want to take on d6. Kramnik, actually retreated the bishop to g3, and it seems, white's king is going to be safer than in the previous encounter. So Anand decided he wants to chase that bishop away, so he plays f5 with the idea of f4, chasing that bishop on g3. So f4 now, and he voluntarily allows the exchange of the dark square bishops, so potentially weakening, Anand's dark squares a bit further. But on the other hand, he's gaining more pressure on white's king. So after bishop takes, knight takes, we now see king e7, and rook a3 is played, and Anand reacts to this just by counter-attacking on the c file. So rook ac8, and after white takes on c8, white's back row is weak, and Kramnik is forced to retract, his move in a way by playing rook a1. Although, he's just evaluating the position as if it's from scratch and as if he'd, never played rook a3. But it does seem, black's doing fine now with this queen c5. So the queen's coming in potentially to the centre, e5, and maybe can rest on f6, and then knight c5 or rook c5 might be on the cards later. So white played now queen g4. And after queen e5, white attacked the queen with knight f3, tempting, black potentially to take that knight. But black wants to keep that, long-range bishop. That's one of the assets, the dynamic assets of the black position. So he wants to keep that pressure going. So he plays queen f6, and now rook e1 is played. And now we see that the c5 square is a useful pivot. So rook c5, potentially, black is threatening things like h5 in some variations, but also simply just, to support knight e5. So this rook, going across the rank is quite useful. And white didn't want to leave it there. He played actually b4. So Kramnik played b4, and after rook c3, there is a deep trap present in this position. Even the engines think, white can take on d4 up to, a certain depth. It takes a certain depth to realise that it doesn't actually work out beyond the horizon, in effect, of the analysis. So what do I mean by that? Computers have and humans share in the realm of tactics, in a combination, to see the tail end of a combination where there might be a dangerous threat. And in this position, it seems as though white is able to do a combination starting with knight takes d4. And I think Fischer referred to this as not seeing the sting at the end of the towel. So this is a classic example of a sting at the end of the towel. So first of all, can you work out the reason why white now played knight takes d4? So I'll give you a few seconds to take in this position and think, what is the reason? 5 seconds starting from now. Okay, the reason is after queen takes d4, Kramnik just fought that rook d1, and he's regaining this piece, and he's even factored in knight f6. So he had to factor in first just the queen retreating because there's rook takes d7. That's straightforward, but he's factored in knight f6. So that's good so far. So no surprises there, because he's noted that after rook takes d4 and knight takes g4, he will have rook d7. But we're reaching the tail end of the combination now, which unfortunately for Kramnik has an important flaw. So after rook takes b7, it's nice that white is material up. So is a pawn up, and these pawns are potentially decisive, being passed pawns on the queen side. However, after rook c1 check, the bishop is forced to retreat to f1, so that's an only move, a box move, as Informator would say. But here, in this position, a devastating blow was played. So can you find a devastating tactic, black to play and win? I'll give you 5 seconds, starting from now. Okay, Anand, to Kramnik's horror, sacrifices his knight, just leaving it unpre to a pawn. Knight e3. So white's now threatening either knight takes f1 or rook takes f1. So he can't play a pawn because it would be rook takes f1 mate, for example. So what can he do? So basically white, after this knight e3, is basically forced to take that knight. And now after f takes e, we see this pawn become a majorly important and dangerous passed pawn, threatening e2. So the white king still can't come out. It can't come out to f2. And if h3, then e2. So how can white stop black playing e2? White can't. So here, Kramnik was forced to resign. So really, it just shows that even top grandmasters, sometimes they get their combinations wrong. The tactics, need to go beyond the horizon. At the end of the horizon, at the end of your analysis, just to make sure there isn't a sting at the end of the tell, as Fischer would say, a sting at the end of the tail end of the combination. So let's have a look in overview and summary at this game, which, unfortunately, maybe ended prematurely with Kramnik going in for that combination. So it was a Slav variation again, a repeat of a previous encounter, and Anand was the first person to innovate on the previous game by playing an immediate rook g8. So basically saying to Kramnik, I don't mind even if you play bishop f4 to g3. I don't have to play bishop d6. So maybe, Kramnik was already a bit disturbed by this, because this would seem to be a very logical and comfortable move to play, this bishop f4 to g3, just trying to neutralise black's counterplay on the g-file. But as it turned out, black had other sorts of pressure, like on the c-file, and this queen centralisation was quite comfortable for black to play. So basically, this rook c5 was annoying for white, and Kramnik decided to be, overly forceful now. First playing b4, maybe just a simple move like rook d1 or queen h3, would be better. But he forced a move with rook b4, so the rook moved to c3, which has just been weakened by that move b4, that c3 square. And, white's under real pressure here. If knight takes d4 is not available, as proven by the game, then what is white doing? Other moves seem inferior. Say queen h5, then bishop takes f3, doubling the pawn. So white's under real pressure here. So we just see this combination, which unfortunately has a sting at the end of the towel. This knight e3. Remarkable. So another win for Anand. So I hope you enjoyed that. Please leave any comments on YouTube. Thanks very much.